All-Star Weekend is always an interesting time for basketball fans. It's made to be and kind of look like this event and this spectacle. And often a lot of the events actually are pretty lackluster. We're going to talk about the All-Star events, kind of my thoughts coming out of them. We're also going to talk about, can the Bulls refocus and what will be their focus coming out of the All-Star break? And then lastly, Russell Westbrook expected to make a decision between the Wizards and the Chicago Bulls. We're going to talk about all this and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
All right, Bulls fans, welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central. I'm the host here, Haize. You guys can follow me off the top at CEO Haize. That's CEO Haize. And we're going to talk a little bit about All-Star Weekend. So All-Star Weekend, as usual, is this mixed bag where some of the events work and some of them don't. Now, we saw one of the more exciting dunk contests that we've seen in the last handful of years. One of the more memorable ones as well is the story of Mac McClung is going to be something that Bulls fans and fans around the NBA talk about and ask, could he bring the dunk contest back? But before leading into that, we had the skills competition that was just boring. Like, the skills competition was just this weird. Listen, I did not enjoy it at all. And as they continue making just go back to what it was the year Derrick Rose won it. The skills competition was fun at that point to me. It wasn't as convoluted. And that's not just because Derrick Rose won it. It was a more straightforward event. Yeah, it's like I said, it's not on paper as exciting, but I do think like when you have the players that have the skills that they do now and the passing abilities and all the things like that, like I would more bigs and like I don't know, like the skills competition though in this current state is kind of just boring. The 3-point contest continues to be one of the more exciting things, and I think that to see players get in rhythm or players that are usually great 3-point shooters to just not be able to really perform well in that event is just always more fun. And shout out to Dame Lillard for winning the 3-point contest as well. He got into the next level and he won that contest again. It was cool, right? Still, yeah, it was fun to watch, but it was all right. Now let's get into the dunk contest. Now this dunk contest this year was, I would say, one of the more fun dunks contests, and that was mainly because of Mac McClung, but not only because of Mac McClung. It was in large part in that because he and his ability to get his dunks on the first try, and I think that was something that's underrated by a lot of people, is just the ability to go out there and do these creative dunks that you get done on the first try. And then on top of that, Mac McClung's dunks were good in live action. But then when you saw the slow motion replay, it even brought together how much better and how much more talent he had on some of these dunks, like the double tap and even though he didn't do a 720 before he dunked it, but the full motion ends up being a 720 because he did another half spin after he dunked the basketball. But it was cool, right? Again, I had fun with this dunk contest. I do think that sometimes if you can get more people involved in it, like more high-flying dunkers, and I think the dunk contest still can be that spectacle that many of us are used to seeing if you've, grew up through the 90s and things like that. But I think to do that, what they're going to have to do is, like, they went into the G League to bring in Mac McClung. At this point, yes, there are NBA stars, Anthony Edwards, John Morant. They've already said they're probably never going to compete in a dunk contest. So what do you do to make it a spectacle again? Bring in the best dunkers from around the world, even if they aren't in the NBA, and then just make it be that. Make it the spectacle because of that. There are so many great dunkers. If you guys see the street balls, the YouTube that you have to go out and search, there are some amazing dunkers out there with God-given ability. Bring those guys in. Have a player sponsor one of those players, right? Have now get your superstar that maybe not want to compete in the dunk contest, sponsor somebody from either these YouTube channels or whatever else, and bring them to the dunk contest. So much with that. But shout out to Kenyon Martin Jr. as well. He had some creative dunks. He didn't get them done on the first time, but you can tell he had the creativity there. Mac McClung, of course, the winner. Trey Murphy, the third. He was cool. The fact that he went to the finals to me, okay, cool. Again, I know everybody has their own thing. And Jericho Sims, God, stay out of any dunk contest ever. That's just bad. Jericho Sims was literally one of the most garbage dunkers I've ever seen in a dunk contest. But outside of all that, it was a pretty fun event, and I had fun with it. And then that brings us to the final, the actual All-Star game. And while the All-Star rules have become more convoluted since they've really made these changes, pretty still easy to follow if you can, the stars put on the show, and that's really what the All-Star game is about. It's not about competing, even though Joel Embiid playing some defense there for a second. You have players that go into that, and it does become more competitive down there in the fourth quarter and things like that. But I think when you look at the All-Star game, it's always going to be this kind of glorified exhibition and showcase. And the players showcase that. And shout out to Jason Tatum winning the All-Star MVP, scoring 55 points, the most, I believe, in an All-Star game. And again, when it comes down to it, All-Star weekend is cool. It's not anything amazing, but it's cool. Now let's get back to the Bulls, right? With this long All-Star break and DeMar DeRozan playing in this All-Star game, which I know some Bulls fans, I don't know, I don't really get a gauge on how many Bulls fans are frustrated at the fact he didn't play in our last couple games when he played in the All-Star game. I always got the inclination that he could play, but they were trying to get him some rest. That's my personal opinion on it. I'm not as triggered by him playing in the All-Star game and not playing in our games leading up to that. But again, I know some Bulls fans are, and if you are, you have that right to do so. But the Bulls sit in this position in the All-Star break where I think that they had to, and I don't know if they actually are, because you can never predict what this crazy bipolar team is actually doing. But I will say this, like, they have to decide on what they're going to do. Now, I know there are some Bulls fans that think we are tanking secretly and we should be tanking. And I talked about on yesterday's episode, we have a 32% chance now at a top 4 pick. But the fact of the matter is that we're getting there seemingly with still trying to win. And I think that's what AK is kind of more so going to be focused on coming out of this All-Star break, and the team as a general is play. Just going to let this season end in its natural conclusion. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to try to go after one of the buyout candidates, which they absolutely should. If they think these buyout candidates are going to help push them into the playoffs and that's their goal, they absolutely should go after that. But I do think that, outside of whoever they get in the buyout, if they do even end up making a buyout signing, that this team is going to let this season come to its natural conclusion. And with that being said, if this team does, in keeping this team together, because I know a lot of people wanted to see the team broken up during the trade deadline, which I still do think major moves are coming in this offseason, at least I hope, if AK's on his job. But if this team just by natural, not trading away a bunch of talent for other first round picks and just pennies on the dollar, naturally end up keeping on to their own pick, and it's a top 4 pick, that really does change a lot of things for the Bulls. Now, again, that top 4 pick would have to hit for it to change things further, and even then, a rebuild is still not coming. I tell you guys, go back. Like, I'm not always right, and nobody is in the sports analysts. Nobody's always right. And I do think when you run into people that think they always have the answers, that's when you start running into issues. But what I do here is I like to try to look at a realistic and level-headed view of what this team is going to do. And I do think even if this team does get a top 4 pick, that is still, the Bulls aren't going to go full rebuild. Now, you may see DeMar leave. You may see them not re-sign Vooch, depending on the money, depending on who they end up drafting. If they luck up and get a number 1 overall pick, they are absolutely taking Wembanyama. And then what does that do to Vooch? To me, that almost may mean that Vooch stays, because then you give him a 1-2 year deal if he's willing to accept that, and bring Victor Wembanyama along as he adds to his body and things like that and prepares for the NBA game. And you can see if you really have that star in them. But even in Scoot Henderson or anybody they get in the top 4, right? The name doesn't matter in this. Because AK is not going to draft in the top 4 and then automatically think, okay, bam, we're good. Let's go full rebuild. Let's get rid of this talent. No, I think they're going to use that influx of talent at a cheaper rate, because keep in mind, rookies have that amazing scale contract. You're going to bring in those players at that contract, and then you see if they do turn into a superstar. But over the course of that, you're still going to try to put the best team on the court, which means you're not completely blowing up. You're still evaluating the talent that you have on this court. So we'll see what goes with the Bulls. But the fact of the matter is coming into it and getting back into games. They don't play another game for 4 days. They don't play until Friday. And, if they have practices, things over that time, it's to really kind of refocus on getting back to the things that the team does right. Now, that puts a lot of expectation on head coach Billy Donovan, who a lot of us just don't have it for anymore, right? And that's been my biggest thing in this, is that even if, and I know a lot of Bulls fans, we need a point guard, we need this, especially in the offseason. I don't even trust Billy Donovan to use a point guard as a point guard in the half-court offense. I just don't. I think as long as DeMar DeRozan's on this team, he's going to ride that hand and use that veteran. And, should he have gone off of it? I think that there is a world in which you can still operate a lot of your offense through DeMar, but still make sure that you set up plays and situations and series for other players. And it seems sometimes that Billy Donovan, like I said before, I'm not going to go back into that, but like I said on yesterday's episode, I just don't think that Billy Donovan has his mind focused on the development of the young players. I think Billy is focused on what is going to win us games now. And if the Bulls were actually winning, we would all appreciate that mindset. But Billy Donovan leaves much to be desired as a head coach. And even if you do end up drafting and the Bulls are lucky enough to stay in that top four and to keep their own pick, you still then are relying on Billy Donovan to then develop that talent. And that has its own set of issues and concerns when you're looking at the history of Billy Donovan. So I just think that unless Billy Donovan is changing his coaching philosophies, which we have not seen necessarily his willingness to do, it's a lot isn't going to change for this team. Now we can change the talent on the team, and thus through changing the talent, does it force Billy Donovan to do something different? You guys know, been very vocal at the fact that I do not think DeMar DeRozan is coming back to the team, and even if he does, I think he's moved by next trade deadline. Now with moving DeMar off the team, I'm not saying that makes the Chicago Bulls a better team, but it does force Billy Donovan to then use and develop some of these younger players, at least in theory, right? We don't know that for sure because it's Billy Donovan we're talking about. But the Bulls should and hopefully are using this long break to kind of refocus in the players specifically. We heard about the turmoil possibly in the locker room between Zach and Billy Donovan. And that always ends up, as long as you keep that, it's sometimes players and coaches can work it out. Let's be clear. Winning cures all. And if the Bulls were to go on this long winning streak, they got, I think, 23 games left. I always say if we can win 18 out of those last 23, you're going to see a completely different Bulls team, not just because of the play, but because of the level of confidence, because of them like coming together. You remember when this team used to look like they were having fun playing together? It's been a very long time since we've seen that version of the Chicago Bulls team. So the All-Star break could do some things for the Bulls. I'm not necessarily hopeful of it, just being in my realistic mindset state that it's going to change much on the outlook of the Chicago Bulls season. But they have to ride, well, not have to, but they have made the decision and choice to ride out this team, this current construction of this roster to its natural conclusion at the end of this season. That allows you to evaluate some things. We're getting better looks at Dalen Terry, especially with players being out. I'm doubtful that continues to get those extended looks at Dalen once everybody's back healthy because, again, we're talking about Billy Donovan and Billy Donovan's lack of having a focus on developing his younger players. But again, everything isn't all on Billy Donovan. A lot is, and a lot's on the players also, and a lot's on AK and Eversley. And everybody that's sitting at this table has to make a decision to kind of refocus and decide what they want to do. Zach LaVine has not been the efficient player that he once was. We know that. Now, does a point guard help that? It could. It absolutely could. Now, he was efficient before without having that point guard, but there is a world in which you can say that getting a better construction and taking the ball out of Zach LaVine's hands in the fourth quarter can potentially make him a more efficient player. But then you still need to rely on Billy Donovan to run those type of plays for him in which he's coming off catch and shoots. It all comes down to this. The All-Star break is a time to really reflect. For fans, for the players, hopefully, for the coaching staff, for the owners, for the GMs, and look at really where your season is and where things have gone out. The offseason is a little bit of that as well. But with the NBA offseason, it's really kind of, you get after the finals go, and depending on when your team gets eliminated, but after the finals, it gets really rocking and rolling. We really have a dead month in there, and then we start rocking and rolling. We got the Summer League, the draft combine, the draft itself. I said those in the reverse order. Then free agency, and that gets rocking and rolling, and then training camp. It's not that long of downtime in the NBA to really sit and reflect. This is one of those times. And hopefully this front office is reflecting on what needs to be done because we, as Bulls fans, don't deserve to go through another season like this season has been. We, as Bulls fans, don't deserve the lack of heart, energy, and effort we see from this team at times. We, as Bulls fans, don't deserve to question the ability of our head coach to develop the younger players that should be the future of this team. There's so much going on with this. There's so much, and a front office that maybe is not willing to admit some of their faults and mistakes that they've made in constructing this roster. It's time. And in going through a time of not much Bulls news and calmness and things like that, to just really reflect on what this NBA season so far up until this point has meant and been for the Chicago Bulls and the Bulls fans, it's been rough. It's sucked, to just be quite frank. This has sucked. And it hasn't felt good. It hasn't left much hope. It hasn't left a good taste. It's just, this season has been a stress. And hopefully, this front office gets back to trying to build that team and look at this team objectively and realize that you built a flawed boat. Let's go out and fix that boat. Now, before we go, Russell Westbrook is expected to decide, at least this was the rumor, and you never know. They say between the Wizards and the Bulls, apparently the Clippers and the LA teams, this camp is trying to get him to move him off the LA teams and kind of focus on that. And here's what I'll say. Still hasn't been officially bought out by the Utah Jazz, which we still would have to wait for him to clear waivers whenever he's bought out. So if he is going to be bought out, that decision needs to be made and done and get that done with so that you can clear waivers and then take your time to go to your team. Because right now, even if Russell Westbrook was to decide, I want to go to the Bulls, it's going to take a minute to get there because you have to be bought out. You then have to clear waivers, and then you would have to sign with the Bulls. So, you're eliminating time to get acclimated. Like, this is a time, especially over the All-Star break, had he already agreed to that buyout and decided on where he's going to be, could have been acclimated, talk to that team, get included in the roster. Now, again, if he comes to Billy Donovan's very familiar with him, knows how to use him. So maybe there's that little bit of solace in that. But at where I sit right now, and I've told you guys this, no matter who the buyout candidate is, the fact that we came down and we're hinging our playoff hopes to who we're going to get in the buyout. Last season when we got Tristan, we knew we were going to be a playoff team. We just needed that little bit of extra of what we were missing. This year, we are trying to solidify a playoff run with a buyout candidate. And that's where this season has been for the Chicago Bulls fans. It's been rough, y'all. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you get those voicemails, text messages, emails in, and we'll tell you guys how to do that. Make sure you're following the show at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform. You can also send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. Chicago Bears Central, Bulls Central Pod at bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. Like I like to end everything on Go Bulls, See Red. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.